So Gutenberg now has his type on the press, 2 columns, 42 lines for each column, and so this is actually 2 pages. Now the next thing he has to come up with is a ink that will work. Well, the scribes were using ink, of course, to write with their quill pens, but it was thin and runny, water-based, and it wouldn't stay on the top of the letters. So he had to figure out a thick, sticky ink. He finally came up with boiling linseed oil in a pot like this and adding lead and copper oxide to make it black. And he came up with a beautiful black ink that's never been exceeded even in the modern world. But of course today we can't use lead and copper oxide, but we still use boiled linseed oil for many paints and many inks. And so this is modern ink, but it's basically the same thing that Gutenberg invented. So we can get a little bit out here. You can see how thick and sticky that is. Now he would place the ink on the inking stone here. The next thing he had to figure out is how do I get that ink from here over to just the tops of my letters. That's when he came up with ink balls. He just took a bowl, put a handle on it, stuffed it with horsehair, and covered it with gänzefleisch, goose skin. This is not goose skin today, of course, it's lamb's wool and lamb skin. But this is the way he would roll ink onto the ink ball. Turning it and rocking it and rolling it in the ink. And so Gutenberg was actually the first rock and roller. Now I used 2 ink balls because that would speed up the process of inking all 4 columns. Rolling up the ink balls took practice and skill and also a little time. So we've got to get the ink perfectly smooth on the ink balls without any lumps, and it has to be the same thickness over the whole surface of the ball. Now we have the ink balls all prepared now. The next thing we do is to apply the ink onto the tops of those letters. We come straight down with the ink balls, because if we went like that, it'd smear off onto the edges of those letters and just fill it in. So the person who did this was called the beater. We have to get a little ink on every letter, and we can't get too much on the letter because that would just fill it in. Now the next thing we have to have is something to print on. So we'll get a piece of paper here. Thank goodness Gutenberg didn't have to invent paper.